Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I am Jenny Sherrard and I am the Head of Equality and Policy at the University and College Union. Really delighted that today I'm joined by Ashley Fleming and Abigail Evans from Bindmans Solicitors, who are very much our experts on immigration related issues, and which is absolutely why we're having this session today, because as many of you will know, there was recently a new points-based immigration system introduced to the UK, linked, as you will know, to Brexit and the changes to immigration there, but also affecting migrants from right across the world. And today's session is the latest in a series, and we're going to focus mostly on the skilled worker visa, which is sort of taking the place of the old Tier 2 visa. And so today, Ashley and Abigail are going to talk you through some of the main changes, some of the alternative routes as well, and also the impact of COVID. And then we're going to deal with a couple of questions which have been submitted in advance, and hopefully address lots of the queries that you might have. As we go through, you may have questions. If you do, please feel free to post those into the chat. What I will say is I can't guarantee that we'll be able to answer everything today. If your question is sort of quite specific to your particular context, then it might be something that we need to take away and perhaps come back to. But we are looking to revise and update a series of frequently asked questions, which will be available on the UCU website shortly as well. So if there's anything that we can't answer today, we will try and address it through those. But please don't be shy. Feel free to ask your questions if you haven't already sort of submitted any in advance. And hopefully through all of the information that Ashley and Abigail will be throwing at you, any questions you have will be answered. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to Ashley first of all, and let Ashley talk you through some of the main aspects of the scheme. And yeah, as I say, feel free to tap questions into the chat, but otherwise over to you, Ashley.
Okay, thanks very much, Jenny, and thanks everyone for coming to this webinar today. So as Jenny said, what we are going to do, we're going to focus on the skilled worker route and give you a brief overview of the scheme, and also to give you some of the headline changes between that and the Tier 2 route, which many of you will be familiar with already. I also will flag up the global talent route. It's one of my very favourite routes. I think it's such a good route to get into, particularly for academics if you can. So I just want to sort of put that out there to make sure that people are aware of it, and then we can take any questions that you might have about that route as well. So just to start off with then, the skilled worker route was introduced at the start of December last year, and it was introduced as a replacement to the Tier 2 route. Now, many of you who are sponsored by your employers will be under the Tier 2 route. So what's important to note is that going forward, the definition of a skilled worker, so those people that are under the skilled worker scheme or are eligible to apply to extend or to apply for indefinite leave to remain as a skilled worker, include those individuals who've previously been granted leave to remain or permission to stay in the United Kingdom under the Tier 2 route. So if you're looking on the Home Office website and thinking, I can't find the right form for a Tier 2 worker, what you need to be looking at now is skilled worker. Okay, so going forward, that's the route that you will be applying for your extension and your indefinite leave to remain in due course. Now, some of the key points of the Tier 2 scheme have changed with this transition into the skilled worker route, and some of the sort of positive changes I'd like to flag with you. So first of all, the skill level for sponsorship has been dropped from level 6 to level 3. Now that's not so relevant for academics, as you were previously recognised anyway, it being at level 6, but just to flag that up in case if anyone is thinking about a change of employment and is looking at a role that's perhaps deemed less skilled. Second of all, under the the tier 2 route, there was a requirement for an employer to complete something known as the resident labour market test, which at times might have been prohibitive to institutions employing foreign nationals. So the requirement for a formal resident labour market test, which saw employers having to advertise a position for usually a minimum of 28 days, the Home Office would dictate where those adverts had to be placed, what the advert had to contain. That formal requirement has now gone, so it's no longer there under the skilled worker scheme. Whilst there's no formal requirement for the resident labour market test, the employer themselves, they will still have to retain evidence on file. So on the HR records, they will need to show how they have identified the individual for the job. So if there was a formal recruitment campaign, then evidence will need to be kept of the advert, the interview process, and the shortlisting process, so that the Home Office can show on an audit to the Home Office that they did comply with the correct procedures. If there wasn't a formal recruitment campaign and someone was perhaps identified through headhunting another way, the Home Office will also still have to record on file that has been done, but it's not part of the leave to remain application for the individual applying for leave as a skilled worker. The next thing is that the Home Office has also introduced the notion of tradable points. So what this is when looking at sponsorship, the Home Office are looking to award points for certain eligibility criteria, which includes the salary and the skill level of the job. Now, when looking at salary, you will all probably be aware that the Home Office has divided certain occupations into occupation codes. So each code will have a salary attributed to that code. So for example, the most common code used for academics is 2311, which many of you will, I presume, be sponsored under. And so that has a going rate for a code. Now, if the job is, for example, a PhD position, like jobs under the code 2311R, then the individual might be eligible for tradable points, which means that they could earn 90% less than the going rate salary published by the Home Office and still be eligible for sponsorship. So if somebody wanted to rely on tradable points based on having a PhD, then they would provide evidence of their qualification as part of the application process, so that the Home Office can verify that they have got a PhD that's equivalent to UK standards. The other thing to note is that when the system moved over to skilled worker, there was a reconfiguration of the minimum salary thresholds for certain occupations. Now, one thing that you might note when you go into, if you were to look at the immigration rules, is that the salary level for higher education individuals has increased quite substantially. So previously we were looking at a base salary of £33,000 per annum based on a 40-hour week. Under the skilled worker route, that has jumped quite a lot, and it's now £40,700 per annum based on a 39-hour week. And the Home Office say this is due to them using a different source for calculating their salary requirements. Now that could be a worry for a lot of people, but what I want to say is that there are transitional provisions in place for those individuals already sponsored under that occupation code 2311 to rely on the lower salary, so the salary that was in place under the tier 2 scheme, i.e. this £33,000 per annum for a 40-hour week. So basically, those people that were already in the scheme before these changes come in are the ones that will generally be able to rely on the lower salary up until the 1st of December 2026. So it should give individuals the ability to rely on their previous salary threshold, both in an extension application and in a settlement application. So there are some caveats to that, but the general rule of thumb is that there will be this lower salary threshold that people can rely upon under the transitional provisions, which is great. Now, in terms of the scheme itself, one thing to note is that it is still a 5-year route to indefinite leave to remain, and Abby is going to talk about the requirements for indefinite leave to remain in a minute. The other thing, however, to note is that the time cap that someone could spend in the UK has been lifted. So it used to be 6 years. So often what we had is that perhaps someone had excess absences at some point in their 5-year qualifying period, and so they needed extra time to get to indefinite leave to remain, but were often caught out by that 6-year cap. So that's no longer relevant. So someone can stay in that category for longer should they need to, or should they wish to, if they are not quite at the point where they're ready to apply for indefinite leave to remain. So quite a lot of positives to take away, I think, from the change from Tier 2 to skilled worker. But just to know that those people that are in the Tier 2 scheme, your route hasn't disappeared. It is just been rebranded and seen some changes to the skilled worker route, but you will be able to continue to live and work here, sponsored by your employer under this new skilled worker option. And so with that, I'm going to pass over to Abby, and she will talk to you a bit about the settlement requirements.
Thanks, Ashley. Hello, everybody. Yes, I know that for many people, one thing that you're really concerned about is being able to apply for that indefinite leave to remain, which frees you up from having to make further immigration applications and pay the money and worry about visas expiring, that sort of thing. So just like under Tier 2, as a skilled worker, you're on a 5-year route to settlement, and time spent as a Tier 2 worker and then as a skilled worker all counts. So you don't have to make a new application to become a skilled worker in order to get indefinite leave to remain. You can use the time spent as a Tier 2 worker. You can also use time spent under the Global Talent Visa, which Ash is going to talk about. Also, as if you were a Tier 1 person or an innovator, those times can also count. So you can push it all together to get your 5 years. There are rules relating to being to how many absences you've had from the UK. You have to have had continuous residence in the UK for 5 years in order to be eligible for indefinite leave. Now, the continuous residence calculations are slightly complicated. Essentially, if you've got time spent in the UK before the 11th of January 2018, you calculate your time outside of the UK, and it's limited to 180 days during any consecutive 12-month period, ending on the same date of the year as the date of your application for settlement. So you've got one way of calculating that time. And then for other times spent after 11th of January 2018, you calculate your absences as the maximum being 180 days in any rolling 12-month period, which should be a bit more advantageous to people if you work out when your absences were. Now, obviously, 180 days, that's 6 months. It's a significant amount of time. You're not going to get there with holidays, but for many academics, what you may be worried about is whether your absences due to research activity count. Now, if you're undertaking research and that's approved by your sponsor and it's academic research, so it's for individuals who are in the SOC code 2311, which Ash mentioned earlier, those absences don't count. Because obviously that's part of your employment. Also, people are very concerned about absences inadvertently over the last year or year and a half because of COVID. I'll talk about the COVID exceptions in a minute, but generally absences due to the pandemic don't count towards the settlement eligibility. Other things to be aware of for settlement are that you don't have to have passed an English language test, because you will have already passed an English language test or otherwise proved your English language speaking ability for your previous application. So as long as you've still got that, you can use that and not have to take a new test. But you will have to take something called a Knowledge of the Life in the UK, or just Life in the UK test, which is a requirement for anybody who's applying to settle. It's a computer-based test. It's quite simple. You buy a handbook, and as long as you know the answers in the handbook, then you should be fine. It costs about £50 to do it, so it's another cost. But considering the other costs in immigration applications, it's one of the smaller ones. One thing that is really important is for you to be able to get a letter from your employer confirming, excuse me, that they are intending to employ you for the foreseeable future. And that's the phrase that is used by the Home Office. That's in the rules. So you want the letter to say foreseeable future. Now, obviously, for people who are thinking about switching jobs, you need to keep that under your hat if you're going to be applying for indefinite leave to remain. Much easier to switch to a new job once you've got indefinite leave to remain, because there's no requirement for sponsorship. So if you're coming up to your indefinite leave to remain application, just make sure that you're going to be able to get that letter from the employer. Otherwise, your application will be rejected. You do have to still have your salary at the going rate for your occupation. Again, this is another requirement for settlement. So for academics in the SOC code 2311, the salary is the 33,000 at the moment. So you'll need to show that you've got that. Although there are some, again, COVID exceptions that I'll talk about in a minute. But essentially that's it. If you can tick those boxes for indefinite leave to remain, then your application should go through. Dependents can also apply for indefinite leave to remain after 5 years. So that's spouses, partners and children under the age of 18. Their applications will be considered in line with yours, but they will also have to pay the application fees for putting that in. So it can be quite expensive. Currently, settlement applications are £2,389 per person. I'm going to go on now just to talk a little bit more about the exceptional COVID guidance that is currently in force. Now, obviously, it's a very fluctuating environment, and we don't know how long this guidance is going to be in place. They haven't given any date for the guidance being taken away. As far as we know, I checked today and I can't see any date on it, but it's worth keeping in mind that it is fluid, and that the guidance that's in place now might not be in place in a few months' time. So you want to check if you think you might have to rely on a COVID exception. Check what the position is at the time that you're going to make your application. Essentially, in respect of skilled workers and Tier 2 migrants who are now skilled workers, if you are absent from your employment due to coronavirus, and this includes absences due to illness, or because you have to isolate, or because you can't travel because of travel restrictions, then there won't be any enforcement action taken against your employer, your sponsor, if they are continuing to sponsor you even though you're absent, as long as the absence is due to coronavirus. The sponsor themselves don't have to notify the Home Office if you are working from home because of the coronavirus. So if you were absent from the office for other reasons, then there would be a requirement of the sponsor to update the Home Office with what the situation was. But we're all working from home. You can quite clearly see we're all working from home. And so obviously there's no requirement for sponsors to update the Home Office about that, because that's just accepted as a fact of life at the moment. Lots of people are worried about the fact that they've been placed on furlough. The furlough situation is accepted by the Home Office. Any reduction to your time or partial or full furlough must be part of a company-wide policy that's been put in place to avoid making people redundant. And everybody has to be treated the same in the company. It can't just be specific individuals. Your rate of pay cannot be reduced below the going rate for your occupation unless you qualify for the discounts, so those tradable points that Ashley was talking about. Sorry, you can be, your salary will be reduced while you're furloughed, but as long as that's temporary and your pay then returns to your previous level, which will be your going rate, then that's fine. It's accepted that you'll be at a lower level of salary for some of your times because of furlough, because of COVID, and that's acceptable. So there are some quite helpful exemptions there, and I hope that will alleviate some people's concerns about the way that the pandemic has affected their employment and their income, hopefully on a temporary basis. So that's, in a nutshell, both settlement and COVID guidance. So I'm going to hand you back to Ashley, who's going to talk about an alternative to the skilled worker route, which is the global talent route.
Ashley, you are talking away, but you are muted, unfortunately.
Sorry about that. Okay, so sorry. So the global talent route is another great alternative, in my view, to the skilled worker route. Some of you will know this scheme under its previous name, which was the Tier 1 exceptional talent route. So just with the Tier 2 route, the skilled worker route has also been rebranded in the last couple of years. So we're now talking about global talent. So anyone on the Tier 1 exceptional talent route would now, as a skilled worker, be looking to extend or apply for settlement as a global talent migrant. Now, one of the super things about this route is that you don't need a sponsor. So that means that if you are granted permission to stay under the global talent route, you are not tied to your employer. So it gives you that freedom to work in the UK without having to worry about sponsorship. What you do, however, need, as opposed to sponsorship, is you need an endorsement. Okay, so the initial application is a two-step process. So the first stage of this application would be to apply for an endorsement from an endorsing body. And there's various organisations which are recognised as endorsing bodies by the Home Office. Now, the most common and likely route for an academic to take is to seek an endorsement from the British Academy. And you can seek an endorsement either as a potential leader in your chosen field of expertise or as a future leader in your chosen specialism. So generally speaking, if we think about the exceptional promise category, which is when you're at an early stage of your career, you would be looking to show that you're an active researcher, typically in a university setting, but it can be also a research institute or an industry, that you have a relevant PhD or equivalent research experience in your field of specialism. And then you would be looking to show to the British Academy that you've been awarded or you've held a prestigious fellowship, normally in the last 5 years. So when you make the application, you would provide the evidence of your experience in your field to date. It's got to be supported by eminent individuals in your chosen field, who would basically talk to your experience and the benefit to the UK of having you here. Now, that could be in terms of your research, what your research brings. It could also be the level of funding research funding that you might also bring to the UK, and generally how you would benefit UK research by being here. So it does take a bit of work to put together your portfolio in terms of your supporting evidence. But if you hit those sort of main criteria, then it's a really good option to go down, because it gives you so much flexibility. So you can choose how long you want to be granted permission to stay in the UK under the global talent route. So you could say like 1 year, you could say like 5 years, or anywhere in between. There's no cap on how long you can stay in this route. So if you thought, okay, I'll do it for maybe a couple of years just to see how I get on, when you come to extend, the main criteria for extending your application is to show that you're still endorsed. So it means that the British Academy hasn't withdrawn your sponsorship, or sorry, your endorsement, which to date I've never seen. And a few years ago, I did try and find out if there was any guidance on when they might seek to withdraw an endorsement from someone, and there didn't seem to be any. I mean, that might have changed, but it doesn't seem like it's something that happens. And the other thing is that for extensions, your endorsement has to still be in place. And the next is that you can show that you've earned money, you've earned an income from your specialism. Now, unlike the tier 2, where you've got skilled worker route, where you've got these set sort of minimum salary thresholds, there isn't one under the global talent route. So if it was the case that you were, say you were working at university, you were on a fixed term contract, and then you ended up only being able to secure some sort of part-time role, or you were doing some consultancy work on a self-employed basis, that would be fine. So you would be able to provide evidence that you were deriving some sort of income from your specialism, be that as an employee on a part-time basis, or as a self-employed person, or as a combination of both. So it's just a lot more, it takes away some of the stress, I think, for academics who often have fixed-term contracts and worrying about renewals and extensions. So if you can get into this route, it's a really good option. Now, even though that they are sort of really good points about the scheme, so the flexibility and the fact you're not tied to your employer, one of the really good points is that it can lead to indefinite leave to remain after 3 years. So you're saving yourself a potential 2-year wait to get to that indefinite leave to remain mark, which is is often a goal for a lot of people, is to get to that indefinite leave to remain, free up yourself from any time restrictions on your stay or any restrictions in terms of your employment. So with this route, 3 years would get you settlement. Now, that is if you're endorsed by the British Academy. I should say some of the other categories under Global Talent, so for example, if you were endorsed under the Exceptional Promise category with the Arts Council, for example, it would still take 5 years. But if you're under the British Academy, it would be 3 years to settlement. And the other great thing is that you can combine time that you spent as a skilled worker or a tier 2 migrant together with the time you spent under the global talent route to get to that 3 years. So the time spent already in your previous category isn't wasted time when you're looking towards that journey towards your indefinite leave to remain. So anyone who's not sure or hasn't heard about this scheme or thinks that it might be of interest to them, I would definitely recommend looking into it to see whether it's something that you might be able to qualify for and make that application.
That is very, very helpful. Thank you, Ashley, and thanks to Abby as well for all that really helpful information. We've covered a lot of ground there, and so I'm hoping that everyone's been able to take it in. But I know that in advance of this session, we had a number of questions submitted as well. So if it's okay with you both, I think we could move to take some of those now.
Yeah, that would be great.
Fantastic. So the first one we've got through is around the issue of this person who's sort of been working in the UK for over 3 years and now has a permanent position at university and has extended the skilled worker visa. They would like to know, can they apply for ILR directly or independent leave to remain directly, or apply for a global talent visa at this point?
Okay, Shall I take that one, since I was just talking about global talent? So as I just said, you can combine the time as a tier 2 or a skilled worker with your time as a global talent migrant in order to get to that 3-year mark to qualify for settlement in the global talent route if you're endorsed by the British Academy. But what you have to make sure is that when you're applying for settlement under the global talent route, that you have been granted permission to stay under the global talent route. So you couldn't apply directly to the global talent route for settlement if you have leave as a skilled worker, because you're not a global talent migrant. So the first step would be to apply for endorsement under the global talent route. And then if an endorsement is granted, then you would go on to apply for permission to stay under the global talent visa route. Then once you have been granted permission under the global talent route, then the next step, provided you've got that continuous 3-year period of residence and you've got your endorsement under global talent, is to then consider applying for indefinite leave to remain.
Okay, that's really helpful. So you've got to stage everything properly, but it is possible to switch over, so that is really helpful. And I think a bit of an extension to that question then was that if someone switches from one route to another, so from the skilled worker route to the global talent route, what is the impact on their dependents who are on dependent visas linked to skilled worker at the moment? Would they also have to be switched?
Yeah, so a couple of things to mention here. So the first thing is your dependents don't benefit from this accelerated settlement route. So your dependents would have to still complete 5 years residence in the UK as your dependent in order to be eligible for settlement. Now, they could complete 5 years residence as a combination of a dependent of a skilled worker or under the global talent route. That's fine, as long as it's 5 years as your dependent. And what the Home Office guidance says in terms of them having to switch or not is they say that if the dependents can't apply at the same time, then it's okay for them to switch into the category at a later date, provided they make sure that they make any application before their current permission to stay expires. So there is some flexibility there, but the main thing is to think that even if you go to the 3-year settlement route, they still have to spend another 2 years as your dependent before becoming eligible.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. Thanks, thanks, Ashley. I think at this point, oh, sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to flag something else up, because I think it might be worth flagging, because we're talking here about settlement routes and combining time across different immigration categories, and so I'm aware that some of you will have started off your residence here as students under the tier 4 category, which is now this just student category, also gone under a rebrand now, and then often will have switched into what was the tier 2, now skilled worker category. It's just important to note that the time spent under the tier 4 category will not count towards the 5-year qualifying period for indefinite leave to remain as a skilled worker. Time as a student, the student route in itself doesn't have that same 5-year qualification route to settlement, so it doesn't benefit you. You would have to do your 5 years as a skilled worker or 3 years as a global talent in those individual categories before qualifying for settlement, without counting that time as a student towards the calculation.
That is very helpful clarification, because I know that a lot of our members will have sort of come through as perhaps PhD students and then sort of continued on into early career academia. So yeah, that's something really important to note. So thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing for people that have done that sort of really long journey of whether it's schooling here and then university, or it's been undergrad, masters, PhD, there is a route to qualify for indefinite leave to remain after a continuous period of lawful residence of 10 years. So if someone had done, an undergrad, master's, PhD, then it might be that they would get to 10 years continuous lawful residence with their various different student visas, plus some time, for example, under the skilled worker route. So if they got to 10 years, combining all of that time together before they got to 5 years, say, for example, under the skilled worker route, then that would be a possible way to get to indefinite leave quicker. Because at that point, when you're looking at the 10-year route to settlement, you can combine the student time.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I've just noticed that we've got a comment in the comment section, which is great. I was just about to say that if you do have questions as you're watching, or if you've joined us late, please feel free to post questions into the comments section. And I think that this kind of links on a little bit from the dependent question. So I'll just read this out now from this person. So can dependent have spent 5 years as dependent with 2 years in another category and 3 years in global track?
Talent, yeah, exactly. That's what I said. So they have to do 5 years in the UK as your dependent, but that can be a combination of time between dependent under the skilled worker route or dependent under the global talent route, for example. But what I was saying is that just because you qualify after 3 years residence in the UK, say for example under global talent, they wouldn't qualify after 3 years. It would have to be 5 years as your dependent, made up of however that's made up, whether it's time from 2 different categories.
That's really helpful clarification. Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Excellent. If it's okay, then I think we'll move on to the next question. As I said, people, if you're just joining us, please feel free to add questions into the comment section. We will answer any that we can. Any that we can't, we will try to pick up afterwards via our frequently asked questions document. But I think if it's okay with both of you, I'll move on to the next question. So the next question relates to someone who's unfortunately been diagnosed with a serious illness leading to absence from work. They're saying that they may be off work for more than 6 months and have had some related absence from the UK, and also that their salary is likely to drop as a result of this, and they would really like some advice on how this might impact on their independent leave to remain application. So could you say anything on that, please?
Yeah, I can take that, Ash, that's right. So ordinarily, if you are absent from work without pay or on reduced pay for more than 4 weeks during any calendar year, then your visa as a skilled worker should be cancelled. But there are exceptions that apply when the time away from work includes periods of sick leave. So you shouldn't have it cancelled. If you're looking at how your period of sick leave affects your application for settlement, what you'll need to be looking at is that your salary is at the going rate for the job. Now, if you're on 24,000, which is what this individual thinks their salary will be, then you have to show that reduced salary is for the period of time that you're on your sick leave, and that your salary will be increased upon your return to work. So you'll need to get your employer to show the dates that you're away from work due to the sick leave, and that is the reason why you are absent, and that once you're able to return to work, your salary will go back to whatever it is on a normal basis, that normal salary having to meet the threshold or the going rate for your occupation. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Abigail. That is really helpful, and I think we always think we're a little bit more flexible than that for people in that sort of situation, but helpful to have the clarification about what the restrictions are. Thank you. The next one, I think, question links back to something you were saying previously in relation to English language requirements. So this person who submitted a question has said, they don't have a degree from an English-speaking institution, but they do have a qualification level C1 from when they gained their Tier 2 visa in 2016. So can this be used to apply for independent leave to remain? Are there any other English language requirements?
Do you want me to take this one? Yeah. Sorry, bear with me. My screen's just doing something very odd.
I mean, that's fine. I can answer it. In terms of the English language requirement, if you've already, most people who have gone into tier 2 or skilled worker will have had to meet an English language requirement when they make their application. So this individual who posed the question had already taken a level C1 test, which is higher than the B1 level that's required for indefinite leave to remain. So the Home Office position is that if you've previously been granted leave in the UK, so permission to stay, and you were required to demonstrate that you had that English language ability of at least level B1, and you haven't had any sort of unbroken periods of leave since then, so you haven't switched into a different category that didn't require that English language, and the test provider, so IELTS, which is still an approved test provider, as long as your test provider is also still an approved test provider at the time you make your indefinite leave to remain application, you can rely on that previous qualification. So the short answer is yes, provided that the provider is still approved by the Home Office and you used it for a previous grant of leave that required level B1.
Fantastic. That is, I'm sure, will be welcome news to the person who posed this question, and also really helpful clarification for others watching. So, thank you for that. I've noticed that we've had one more comment through in the comments section from Pewterbot. I'm just going to pop that onto the screen, and basically they've said that they've been working under the Tier 2 visa for 3 years. I've just been given a further 3-year extension on that visa, but only have 1 year remaining on their contract. I'm sure that a lot of our members who are on increasingly sort of precarious employment contracts will be interested to know the answer to this question. So, if there's a mismatch between the length of your contract and the length of your sort of visa, does that matter when it comes to applying to independent leave to remain?
Yes. The short answer is that the employer has to be able to say that they're going to employ you for the foreseeable future. If you've got 1 year left on your contract, it's not the foreseeable future. So you may run into difficulties with that.
I mean, I think with a year to go, though, I think that would be fine. I think at the time you're making the application, they would be saying foreseeable. I think if it was fixed term ending very soon towards the expiry date, then it'd be much more tricky. But I think when you've got a longer period to run, I think it might be easier, and I think your employer would probably be willing to state it. I mean, we've had it in the past where employers won't give that what's the word I'm looking for? Not undertaking as such, but guarantee to the Home Office, I guess, that they will require for the foreseeable future. So I think it's not clear cut. I think the longer you have to run on your contract, the easier it will be for them to say it. But I definitely think it'd be worth a try. Jenny, you're
muted. Thank you. It had to happen at some point, didn't it? Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think that understanding that a year is not necessarily an insignificant amount of time is certainly helpful for, as I say, a lot of our members whose contracts can be sort of 1 or 2 years long.
Yeah, and I think with that the key thing is to apply as soon as you're eligible, once you've hit your 5-year mark, because remember, say worst case scenario, your application is refused, you would still have leave to remain left, right? So you're not going to be in the situation where all of a sudden your leave's expired and you've got a refusal and you don't know what to do. So it gives you opportunities to have those discussions with your employer to extend your contract if you haven't already done so, to maybe think about the global talent route, or to, if you had to, worst case scenario, look for other work. So I think be proactive on this. Don't leave it to the last minute and then think, oh, I've got a week left of my contract, what am I going to do? Get in there sooner rather than later.
Yes, I think that is very sage advice, and when it comes to anything related to the immigration system, do it as soon as you possibly can, so that if
well, you
anything,
never know when things are going to change, do you? So if you qualify, grab it and make your application whilst you can, for sure.
Absolutely. I think it also sort of gives people a little bit more grace if things go wrong with, evidence required. We know that, from experience, some of our members have had questions about, what qualifies as evidence and everything. And I think giving yourself as much time as possible to get that sorted just gives you more wriggle room should anything, you need to get any documents or anything together as well. So that's really helpful. We've got just a few minutes left. I don't see any more questions in the comments. Please do feel free to add them in if you do have any. But I guess if I've just actually seen one as I speak. So this one is from Niran J. Wright. I don't know if it's something we'll be able to answer, but we can certainly put it to our experts here. Do accompanying dependents have COVID work travel exemption that's applicable to the global talent visa limit? So essentially, this is one where we're asking if dependents are subject to the same exemptions in relation to COVID work and travel.
So I'm not quite clear on the question. So is it to do with COVID or is it to do with work in terms of the exemption? So we have the COVID exemption. So if you got stuck overseas, for example, because of COVID, then there are exemptions on that basis. And equally, the 180 days you can ignore absences to do with, for example, working in your area of expertise. So
I think that's fine if we're not clear. I think as I said at the outset, we are certainly happy to try and answer questions, but sometimes we might need to get a little bit more information. So what I'll do for the person who's posted that question, I'll pop my email down into the comments section as well. If you want to email through, then we can pass that on and try to address that in our FAQs document. So the person has just tried to clarify by saying work travel is not counted towards the 180-day limit. If dependents travel together, is it applicable with the person? So if the dependents are joining the visa holder on their work travel trips, I don't know if that's something we do know.
So my understanding is that they're all covered by appendix continuous residence. So how the rules are drafted at the moment is that the dependent, it used to be that there was a separate route under the rules for PBS or points-based system dependents. And then when it's been redrafted under the new format, so we've got appendix global talent or appendix skilled worker, the dependents are now included under the same scheme. So they have to have spent the same sort of continuous period in the UK with permission as a dependent of the person. Now, I'm pretty sure, and I'll double check this once we finish the route, but because they're under the same appendix continuous residence, then the same calculations are involved and the same exceptions are involved. But if you drop your email to Jenny, I'll double check that for you once we've finished, and I can send you an email just to confirm.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Ashley. And just to reiterate that obviously we don't want to be giving out sort of legal advice on the fly, and so we're being cautious about saying anything for definite in relation to questions coming through. But at the same time, it's really helpful because we can take these questions away if there's anything we're unclear about, and then make sure that we update our FAQs to answer the queries you've got.
So Jen, yeah, so I've just I've just looked at it just now, and it's as I suspected. So if the dependent is away with the partner, and it's for an approved reason, then under appendix continuous residence, they both have the same exemptions in terms of the absences.
Excellent. See, even as we go, we're able to to provide that exact clarification. And we've had one other question through from Giovanni, who has been asking, I guess it's about sort of a different kind of switch between different visa types. So somebody who's been working here for 2 years on Tier 2 visa and then switches to PhD program, what would be the implication for their Tier 2 sort of years of accrued, if you like? Is it a case of use it or lose it, or can they be sort of carried over if that person were to return to sort of skilled worker visa? I don't know if you could add any clarification on that.
So this is in terms of settlement. In order to get indefinite leave to remain, you have to have had 5 years continuous residence in the UK under one of those categories that we talked about earlier. So that's as a skilled worker, global talent, Tier 1, innovators, sole representative of an overseas business. All of that time spent in those categories counts as part of your 5 years. Time spent as a student doesn't count. So you, from my understanding from your question, is that you've been here as a Tier 2 and you're going to switch into a student category. So by switching into a student, you've taken yourself out of the eligible types of visas to get to that 5-year point. So you'll have to, if you switch back from being a PhD student into a Tier 2, you'll have to do your full 5 years. Alternatively, if you switch into global talent, you can do it your 3 years.
That's very helpful. Unfortunately, it does mean those switching into PhDs are perhaps less well off in this system, but it's again really helpful, so people are going in with their eyes open on this. So that's great. Thank you, Abigail, for that clarification. I think we are sort of coming towards the end of the session, so I guess I just want to check if there's anything in particular that you sort of key points to take away, anything that you would like to sort of reiterate from what you said earlier in terms of the sort of most important thing people need to be aware of in relation to the changes that have happened. I'll throw it open if anyone's sort of got anything that they really want to reiterate.
Not necessarily. I think one of the key things, I think everybody's working towards indefinite leave to remain, and I think the biggest sort of tip, if any, I would give you is to just keep a running record of your absences from the UK. It's one of the most galling things I think that anyone has to do, is to sit down and try and work out where they've been for the last 5 years. It's really time consuming. So if you can just have, as boring as this sounds, have a spreadsheet saved to your laptop so that anytime you're going away anywhere, you can know when you went, when you came back, where you went and why you went, so that you're not having to put together this jigsaw puzzle 5 years later. It just will make your life a huge amount easier come that application. And then the other thing I do think is that, as I have banged on a bit about the global talent route, but I do think it is a really good route. If you can make use of it, you can hopefully get to indefinite leave to remain sooner. And so if you are interested in that, I definitely say have a look at it. And there's no harm in trying. If you think you're borderline in terms of meeting the requirements, you can apply for the endorsement and try. You don't have, if you got refused, it doesn't impact your Tier 2. Your skilled worker visa, but if it's approved, then it gives you that option as well.
I think the only thing I would like to just say is obviously you are, when you're a skilled worker, just like as a Tier 2, you are sponsored by your employer, so it's important to keep a good channel of communication with your employer about any concerns that you have, either about the length of your contract or whether they need to report your absences or not report your absences. Obviously, it is very up in the air right now with COVID, and I hope that we've gone through some of the exemptions about working from home and sick leave and stuff. So if you're worried that your employer is possibly confused by this, then it's worth keeping that communication open with them, rather than getting into a panic later down the line because they've done something that was unhelpful, or you just haven't acknowledged the fact that you're in a sponsor relationship. So I know it's not always easy to talk to HR, but if you can, then just make sure that you've got a friendly person that you can have a relationship with on this matter.
Yes, that is really helpful advice. And of course, UCU is there to support you with those conversations too. So, if you don't know who's best to speak to, maybe just start off with your UCU branch and see what support they can provide you locally as well. But that has been very, very helpful. I think I'm not seeing any more questions in the comments, so I am just going to say a massive thank you to Ashley and Abigail for all of the really helpful information they have given to us today. I know that there's been a lot to take in, and so you can watch this session back afterwards, but we will also be regularly updating the frequently asked questions documents that we have got, and I have posted a link to that in the comments as well. What I will also say is that we recently did a session on the EU settlement scheme, which may be of interest. If you haven't watched it already, again, I've posted the link to that in the comments. There is one more week left for people to apply to that scheme. So if you haven't done so already, and it's something that you're eligible for, please do so. And if you are a branch rep watching this and know that you've got members who might not have done it yet, please spread the word to make sure that everyone is aware. But yeah, thank you so much, Abigail. Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm sure we'll have you back again soon to answer more of our members' questions about various immigration issues. But that's been super helpful, and I hope everyone has a lovely day. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jenny.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.